Good evening, and welcome to the Dryden Theater. I'm Jared Case, Curator of Film Exhibitions here, and I'm very happy to see all of you here for our Rochester premiere of Videoheaven. I was just talking with Alex over dinner, and it's next going to Australia, along with the film that we showed last night, Pavements. So we're very excited to get it before that entire continent. It's a really wonderful film. Sit back and relax because it takes you deep into the culture of home video. And, well, I won't explain the film because you're going to watch it. We're going to be presenting a DCP of the film on our Barco projector. It's from Cinema Conservancy. Will be presented by our chief projectionist, Sherry Smith. So a big thank you to her for all the work she's doing up there. And once again, tonight we will follow the screening with a Q&A with Alex Ross Perry. So if you would like to stay and listen or join in, we'd be happy to have you, especially committing that much of your time on a Wednesday night to this special project. So without further ado, I am very happy to once again welcome to the podium Alex Ross Perry.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. This is a long movie, so I don't take up too much time. Hopefully we can watch it and enjoy it, and I'll be back at the end of it for a discussion. I really appreciate people coming out to this film. In particular, it means a lot to me. I've spent over 10 years making this movie. It's extremely personal to me. It is a project I have loved working on. Every moment that I have been able to sit with it, and I really never thought I would finish it. And the fact that it's out in the world is very special. And there's only ever going to be so many attendees at a 3-hour documentary essay film about video stores. But I'm grateful for every single one of them at every screening, because this is the sort of thing that you maybe hear about it and you're like, that might be my favorite movie of the year. Well, that's who I made it for. And if you're like, that sounds unwatchable, why is that movie so long? Then it's probably not for you. And that's fine. But I really love this film, and I'm very proud of the work that went into it. And I'm very excited to discuss it with everybody in a few hours. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
For spending time with us, and it's been a wonderful experience. I wanted to start out a little cheekily. The headline in your interview with filmmakers said something like, "Everyone who worked on this film was a total loser."
Okay. Well, this isn't something that cool people would make, and it's not something that people with commonly accepted or popular interests would want to spend 10 years of their life making. People who don't really have much else in their lives would want to spend so long living in the world of making a long treatise on what film spectatorship has meant throughout my entire lifetime and how people act around movies and what it means to watch a movie. And I'm very proud of the fact that I think most of my interests are niche and unpopular, even ones that are popular or unpopular. Just because bands sell lots of tickets to concerts doesn't mean it's a popular band to like. It just means that they have a huge fan base. And I think this sort of love of film and video culture and that sort of film spectatorship is ubiquitous, but to obsess over it is anything but cool. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that if you were talking to someone who was like a cool person, they wouldn't want to talk about this. But they also wouldn't want to come watch movies at a theater like this. They wouldn't want to do anything that I think is normal.
But I think part of that is that we have taken film going and home entertainment for granted for decades. And I think one of the wonderful things about this film is that you go in and point out the particulars about home entertainment that we have taken for granted. And the fact that it's gone now and that we can only see it now through the films that we used to watch at home is wonderful. So if there's a question, I'm trying to put this in the phrase of a question. What was your experience with this type of entertainment. No, I can't do it.
Okay, that's not really not a question. And it doesn't really matter. Like, my own experience of renting movies doesn't matter. It's immaterial to the film. Obviously, I grew up renting movies because I was born in '84, much like the film Body Double. Came out about 3 months after I was born. But, the film is not about my memories of going to the video stores. That hopefully, after watching 170 minutes of it, it's obvious that the filmmaker is making this movie from a deeply personal perspective. The store that features very early in the movie, when we're contrasting Blockbuster's glossy commercials with a lo-fi commercial, West Coast Video, that was my childhood store, a sort of Philadelphia-based chain. There was some elsewhere, but they were largely in and around the Philadelphia area. And it was important for me to put that in there, but the movie is about, my story is the story told in the movie. It is one migrating from my memories of dimly lit mom and pop stores like West Coast Video with hundreds of track bulbs emulating the spectacle of a classic cinema, following my spectatorship into Blockbuster and then back into independent niche and esoteric stores where I really had an education and then worked. And while the film is not told in the first person, if it did, it would just be to keep people out. That wouldn't be a universal story to tell about Americans' relationship with video culture from the late 70s to the present and into the future. That would just be my story. It is my story, but calling it that would keep people away from it. So I'm able to make something that's deeply personal, but also because of Dan Herbert's research that the film is based on and inspired by, it becomes both subjective and objective. And the film, by design, starts off, and when we make our two-tape set, this is where the split will be. The first several chapters, the first three, the binary history of the stores, the 80s, and then the 90s and the heyday of the ubiquitization of spaces, those are all facts. That's not, there's no, and the adult section, those are all facts. That's just Dan's research and then my interpretation of his research, using these sources to tell a literal story of how many stores there were at X time and how that manifested in fictional storytelling. Then the second half of the movie, the part about Clerks, the part about the decline of stores as told through films, and then the epilogue, so parts 5, 6, and 7 become my subjective interpretation of what these clips mean. And while the film doesn't announce that that's what's happening, it no longer becomes about facts, because there are no facts about Clerks. There was tens of thousands of video Clerks over decades, and every one of them was different. So there is no fact. The fact is that there's 75 clips of Clerks being shitty in movies and TV shows. That's a fact. My job with the project was, what do we make of that? Someone else can make something different of that. What I made of it as a clerk who largely had a very banal existence behind the counter and occasionally had an explosive argument with an irritating customer is what it is in the movie, is that the more I looked at these, the more the second half of these clips and the period of the 2000s where these depictions are migrating from big, beautiful, glossy romantic comedies and sitcoms into the worst looking indies you've ever seen. My subjective interpretation of this was that the groundwork was laid for the decimation of stores by these very depictions that were presented as all fun and games, but ultimately became anything but, insidiously, not intentionally. And that became the story that I was telling, which is a very personal story to me. But as you know, from research and criticism and academia, you could present with no commentary these same 180 clips to someone else, and they'd say, here's the conclusion I drew. And I would say, well, I disagree with that completely, but that's what you came up with when you looked at the text. That's why there's 2 great books about the same film that draw different conclusions. It can happen. So that became the personal journey of my own narrative as a film watcher and a video clerk into the text of this movie.
Over the last couple of days, we've talked a lot about texture and about media texture, both in terms of how the DCP look now, or how they look in relation to film, or the texture you get from a film that's well loved and worn, and into the texture of the VHS tape. This gets implemented into various interpretations of that. So how did you manage that going into the production of this film?
Well, I don't understand the question, but the texture of like all of our sources.
Well, the texture of the reliving that experience, watching the VHS, knowing that's different than what you would see on a movie screen.
Right. I mean, I guess that doesn't really have much to do with how we made this, because it's not like, obviously some of these films I first saw on video. I can't make sense of this question.
Well, that's okay. We can go to the next
Okay.
one. So when I'm often in this role, I'm asked, well, what's your favorite movie? And I never have an answer to that, but I do usually list some of my favorite cinematic experiences. And as you are relating our history of being exposed to film on video, I was wondering if you had any like standout home entertainment experiences, either being introduced to films or something unusual that happened where you remember the place and time and who you were with.
Well, I have, I think a lot of those, none that really would delight people here, none that have anything to do with the movie, but I think part of why I'm really not a snob about at-home viewing quality. I don't have a 4K player or anything. Like it took me forever to upgrade to Blu-ray, which I only did kind of reluctantly when things I wanted were just only being issued that way. But that is because I think looking at call it nostalgia or call it just simple history in this movie, I lived my whole life renting videotapes, and I still watch tapes. I don't care at all about the difference of quality, and that's because the answer to your question is that like I had a tradition that I made for myself throughout all of probably late middle into high school into college even, where on Thanksgiving Day I would watch an impossibly long film that ordinarily I might not have time for, but it's a holiday, I'm not cooking, I can watch Once Upon a Time in America on 2-tape VHS. I can watch, this is how I watched both Godfather and Godfather Part 2 for the first time. And this was something I did every Thanksgiving. And this is why I'm like, it doesn't really matter how you see a movie. Like, I watched The Godfather on VHS and I loved it. So like, and then I've later seen it projected on film and I love it. Like, but I watched these films on videotape, full screen, getting up in the middle to switch it. And I wasn't thinking like, I just can't get into this film. And I think that that's really important. And I think a lot of what we see in this movie is a recollection of when things were not only tangible, but were so ephemeral that they were on a tape. And the shift that we sort of focus on a little bit at the end to DVD, and we don't really talk too much in this about movies on demand or streaming. We did originally, and we cut all that out because even though we had clips to support it, it just wasn't interesting to us ultimately. It's just like, I just don't care that much about the differences of these things. Like, controversially among even like the 5 people who made this movie, but like I don't mind just like browsing on streaming services for an hour, just looking at what's available. To me, it's a very similar experience to browsing a video store. I know most people don't feel that way, but I can really just like get lost in the deep trenches of, whatever Amazon that just like has thousands of things that you don't even know are on there until you're like, it just is very fun for me. And I think this movie is kind of about that. Obviously, it's about that in a store, but I think it still exists. It's definitely not the same, but you kind of get the same end result from it sometimes, which is like, I don't know what this is. I think I'll check it out. At least I do.
Yeah.
But that's specific to each person's viewing habits.
Sure. You mentioned in your introduction it took you 10 years to make this, and obviously you've been making other things at the same time. Can you talk about the process of the initiation through completion?
It's very simple when I explain it. That sounds like a long time, and you have to remember I'm not working on it every day, or even very often sometimes. So Dan Herbert wrote this book called Videoland, Movie Culture at the American Video Store. It's his graduate thesis. He wanted it to be the first and the definitive book on what video stores meant in America. That came out in 2014. I read it. I wrote to him. I said I would love to collaborate. He said I cut a chapter out of my book about the depictions of video stores on screen. It's not even finished. My editor said, stop this right now. You can't read this chapter. It's 18 pages, 19 pages, and you spend half of it describing what's happening, describing the stores. This doesn't work as a chapter. So Dan sent me that chapter, and he sent me all the films listed within it, which was like 30 movies. Some key texts like Hamlet, Watermelon Woman, Be Kind, Rewind, and some things that are just mentioned in passing. And we started riffing on that. And then a few months later, I went out to where he works at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And we had hard drives now. He had research assistants who had now added like another 50 movies to our list. And then we had these dual hard drives, and we would just get on the phone like weekly for like 2015, 16 into 17 and just look at clips and talk and free associate. And I would have different documents that each became our chapters. And I would say like, all right, let's look at the porn stuff today. Let's look at romance today. Let's look at these clips. And let me just bring up a clip. You look at it, we'll talk. And that just became a longer and longer outline that in some cases was like one of his original paragraphs. And then I'm like, all right, so where does this go? What movie do we go to next? And we did that for a while, and then he got busy writing a book about New Line Cinema and had to sort of step back. But then I was like, okay, well, I think we can take it from here. So starting in like 2020, when no one had anything to do, Clyde Foley, who edited the movie, became involved, and we started giving him these hard drives, and now we had added another dozen or 24 movies, so now we're like 110 clips. And Clyde just started shaping these, and he recorded scratch VO of his own voice, reading what was then the rough draft of the text, which then concurrently Michael Koreski, who's a film critic and editor, started helping me shape and edit and reduce and not be redundant. And Michael was helping me work on the text while Clyde was editing. We watched like a 3.5-hour cut of the movie that was very, in normal movie terms, just an assembly. The first week of 2023, and then convened at Clyde's house to edit one day a week, every week until January of this year when we finished the movie. And we were shaping it. I was sitting there with the laptop, always revising the text while Clyde did the edits. Ultimately, Maya Hawk came in and did her first round of voiceover. That then gave us like a real, like, okay, we need to finish this. We edited for like a year with her voice, making every clip perfectly timed to her delivery, trimming the text, saying like, oh, I think we can get her to say this in 3 sentences instead of 5. Then we did another day with her, like this time last year, and then we just kind of spent the last 6 months of last year taking her final performance and cohering every clip perfectly to the timing of what she delivers, or to our own satisfaction of like, this clip should be long, or like, this clip can be short, 10 seconds, we're done. And yeah, that was 10 years.
Just like that.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, this wouldn't have, if it wasn't for the pandemic, and then on my end, the WGA strike that happened like 2 years ago, this probably would still be like years away from being finished. But both of those gave Clyde and myself the opportunity to like work on this 3 days in a row, which like for me doing that in both the pandemic and then again during the writer's strike had never happened before. Like I'm during the writer's strike working on Videoheaven 4 days a week instead of 1. It was amazing because I had nothing else to do. Yeah. And that was when we recorded Maya's voiceover also because she had nothing else to do. Yeah.
Well, we did want to open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions. Victoria's in the back with a microphone. So yes, Ben's got his hand raised, or at least elevated.
Just one simple question. Was sex lies in videotape is not referred to?
That's true. Well, there's no physical...
I was curious about the logic behind that omission. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with a video store, but it does have to do with the watching of videotapes.
That's true. You kind of answered your own question. I mean, the notion of videotape to us was very interesting in explaining to people what it was when it started. which is to say like 60s into 70s where there's obviously no footage, but we have these great old commercials. And I think we just felt like Videodrome, which exists as a movie, as we say, kind of before commercial movies were part of everyone's lives, kind of did enough. And Sex, Lies, and Videotape, I think, is 89. Mm-hmm. It's long enough later that the notion of videotape as like a camcorder object is just outside the purview of what we could cover even in a 3-hour movie, and very far outside Dan's research. There are interesting books written about videotape, all of which Lucas Hildebrand is the author of one, the title of which escapes me. There is like very interesting academic writing on what videotape is and means, and what it means is like a delivery system for content and messaging. But that is not what it's not what we're doing. You know, there's so much fun stuff like that. The other big example that is exactly the same, has the same answer, is pornography-only stores, which were a thing, and we had every clip of them, 8mm, and more recently the film Maxine, and a handful of others, and we had them all, and we were trying to shoehorn them in until we finally were like, this is just not what the movie's about. And that, yes, the movie is 170 minutes, but there was a cut of it that was like 30 minutes longer, and all those distractions just had to go, including a lot of commercials, all the stuff, commercials about video on demand. And I know this sounds ridiculous considering it's not a short movie, but like we took out everything that wasn't like exactly the point we were trying to make. And yeah, that film is one of them.
So the other more significant question was, the book only focuses on American popular culture in film, video, DVD. Have comparable studies been done for European countries?
That's a great question. I think, by the way, the book I'm thinking of is called Video Revolutions. And there's another one called From Betamax to Blockbuster. These are like good books about videotape as a medium. But From Betamax to Blockbuster is the one I was thinking of. I have no idea. I know that the only answer I have for that is we premiered the film at Rotterdam Film Festival in the Netherlands. And the other kind of headline of our sidebar, they built a whole sidebar about video movies, was a Dutch author, photographer, filmmaker who had published a humongous book about video stores in the Netherlands. And then he adapted his photo book into a documentary, specifically about the local video culture of the Netherlands. And I have his book, and it's very interesting. It's not academic, but it has lots of narratives in it. I assume it's not written in English, but there's a lot of words next to the pictures. So they must be telling some story. And all I can say is if they could put out like a 600-page photo coffee table book about video stores in the Netherlands, there must be more. But they just weren't as prominent. I mean, there's lots of them. There still are. And the people who work there have these wonderful stories to tell. But the statistics we have of like 20,000 stores in America, like those numbers just didn't exist in other places. But yeah, this guy, I don't know his last name, but his name is Gyz, G-Y-Z. And I think his like online moniker is like Video Gyz. And his book is fascinating, and I didn't get to see his documentary, and I suspect it will never play outside the Netherlands. But it is a part of their culture, but maybe they just don't romanticize it the way we do. Yeah. They're very cinema-focused people. And Japan is lousy with all sorts of video culture. And still is.
Yeah. Yes, Victoria, there's a question down here.
As soon as I saw that this was going to be a compilation of video store scenes in movies, I immediately thought, I really hope I see The Fisher King. I really hope I see The Big Hit. I was delighted when they did both appear, and I recognized the couple Seinfeld episodes. And to me, and I was also impressed that it was recent enough that it had that blockbuster sitcom that was on Netflix. I mean, if it was super recent, it would have had Y2K from the past year or so, which was a period comedy. But the question that brought to mind was, what kind of research went into figuring out what movies and shows to include? Because a lot of these scenes, they're not necessarily essential to the premise. So you'd kind of have to know the movie in order to be like, oh yeah, there's a video store scene in that. So what went into figuring out what are all the movies that we need to pull from that had at least one scene in a video store.
It's a good story.
Yeah, I will say that, and I saw that Y2K movie on a plane recently, and there's another movie that also came out kind of at the early part of this year called Freaky Tales that I think also has a video store scene. But like the fact that we don't have those proves my point that we were okay to close it, because these are all just going to be period pieces that use the location identically now. Like, I suspect maybe someday there'll be a period piece that does something different with it, but the two that just came out, having seen that, it's like, we wouldn't have needed this anyway, because this doesn't add anything other than just another example of like, they're still doing it. But I feel like we have enough. So we felt like we can close the books now. Do you have like all I can ever say to people is like, do you have a specific thing that you're wondering how we found it? Because of the 175, I have like 120 different answers. But, you know, Dan's research was comprehensive, as someone getting their PhD must do. He still had access to a research assistant when we started, and she's credited, Katie, and she did a lot as well and was instrumental in finding a lot of those appalling 2000s indies that were not on my radar at all. And then there's like 100 things in here, like 75 things in here, that the answer is just in between 2014 and last December, I watched this movie. Or Clyde watched this movie. Or some friend of ours who knew we were making this watched this movie and said, I've got one for you. This is why I call everyone involved with this a loser. Is like our source wizard, who's our guy who's just getting us every file, pulls a 90210 clip out for us. And we're like, well, we wouldn't have known that. And you knew that. And my colleague from the video store I worked at watched a cut, and he sent us 25 films that no one else had mentioned. And these are like the like Beethoven's Third, the made-for-TV remake of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Like, he's scraping the bottom of the barrel, and he's like, oh, I just knew all of these. And people just know that, and it was a huge thrill to find a new thing, just to be watching some random movie. Like, Ghost has been watched by tens of millions of people for decades. I'm the only person who was ever like, you know what the thing about Ghost is that Patrick Swayze's killed in front of a video store. After that movie has been famous, but up until some years ago, I'd never seen it. But during the genesis of this project, I finally watched it, and I was like, oh, he's killed in front of a video store. This movie's very interesting to me now. And a lot of the clips were just like that, you know? You're watching My Beautiful Laundrette, and there's a video store in the background for some reason. And these, they just appear to you, or to me and to Clyde. The Lethal Weapon 3 thing, again, it's like no one but me ever noticed that they walk from Odyssey Video to Blockbuster in the background of that shot as they move around the car. But that's the way I watch things, and the hope with this film is that an hour into it, the viewer is watching the whole movie the way I watch movies, which is when you cut into a store, your eyes are on the tapes and on the posters, and once we've said 3 times, these are the posters from this film's studio, you're now looking at it and going, those must be the posters from this, whoever made this movie. And these tapes arranged as such must mean something. And my hope is just that by making it a durational film, the viewer gets to then watch things the way I always do, which is like, the scene that's happening here is out of focus to me. I'm focused on like, why are Full Metal Jacket and Jungle Fever in the mystery section in this Saturday Night Live skit? And this becomes a fun way to watch movies. But it was just, like you mentioned the Blockbuster Netflix show, which we take a nice pot shot at. If we'd made this movie in 5 years, a huge, like a leg of our chair wouldn't be there, because things like that, or the Yellow Jackets clip, which like is the kind of thing that Clyde and I work on Wednesday, it airs, and then by the next Wednesday, it's in the movie, where it's like, not only are they doing this on a show that's like kind of about nostalgia or about characters who grew up 20 years ago or something, but they're referencing a film that we've just referenced, and we have younger characters holding up tapes being like, what are these? So we're just like, this is a great clip. I can't believe that we've worked on this movie long enough that we have this Yellow Jackets clip now. And it's really rewarding when something new and good came out for us, or like Madam Web has a Blockbuster in the background. It's just fun. I don't know. It's just the way I watch movies. And unfortunately, all the most peculiar things in here that you're like, where'd you come up with that? It's like, I just watched it, for not for any reason.
Yeah, I sort of feel seen now because I have had to rewind things because when it takes place in a video store, I'm looking at the boxes on the shelves and recognizing Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments there, and I have to go back and pay attention to what the movie's actually talking to me about.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
And I hope we checked off all the ones you were excited to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that in one, I think it might have been the Yellow Jackets clip, they're lining up some video, tapes in the store, and one of them is the Fisher King. So
Yeah. Always. But that's the whole point that we were making 9 years ago. Is like, this is already a feedback loop. It started as a feedback loop. And that's where the oft repeated phrase in the film, movies are talking about themselves, comes from, which is, for me, growing up, you're just delighted when movies talk about themselves because it makes you feel like you're in the movie. And that's still the only critical idea behind most of these scenes, is like, it's just a repository for references, which is great. If you want to tell your audience, go check out Watermelon Woman or Party Girl, as the Yellow Jackets clip also does. Or if you just want to make a playful reference, like something we cut out is that in the Hamlet clip that opens the movie, this is a fun thing of academia, is that Dan had said that he's watching The Crow, which is about someone coming back from the dead on those TVs. He's actually watching The Crow 2, City of Angels. So whoever peer-reviewed Dan's book didn't know as much about the Crow franchise as we did, unfortunately. But that's why we're not. That's why we're all losers, and we just cut all that reference out anyway.
I was thinking back to your other films, and I don't think I remember you in your previous films doing a video store or watching a videotape in your previous films.
It's very cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
So it's kind of out of reach.
The store itself.
Not just doing that much work. Yeah, just that much production design.
Yeah.
But, who knows? Not for lack of trying.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Carol.
Actually, my question is about preservation, seeing as we're at the Eastman Museum. Did you do any research on videotape and preservation? And famously, there are some films that have been put on tape, have never been put on DVD. Depends on the copyright holder. A lot of the films that maybe came out on tape, even the big studios may not feel they're worth it to transfer to digital. So, whether these, I was wondering if you know much about that in terms of and even Jared might know more about this in terms of if films get deposited or everybody's doing certain collections of whatever type of genre or something, who holds the last prints. We've gotten prints here. I know that because David O. Selznick had it, they were deposited here. So we have these great films here. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there are studies about this. A couple of years ago, Yale made headlines by acquiring the first university VHS collection. And I don't remember where it came from, if it was one person's or if it came from some store. But it's recent, whatever this is, there's articles about it. And this huge videotape collection that Yale has, which is believed to contain many rare things and is available for research. And there's a great... I think she's a professor at Yale, an author named Caitlin Benson Allott, who has written a couple of good books on the relationship between movies and the medium on which they're viewed. One of which is called Broken Tapes and Shattered Screens or something. It's Broken Tapes and Shattered something.
I also know from Selznick's program is that it's a problem to preserve videotape. It's not gonna.
Oh, certainly. This is the last time to start doing it. And yeah, they get moldy. And we allude to this in the movie where we show the clip of Canadian film, I Killed My Mother, where it says a new format emerged to lose customers and alienate people unable to adapt. But frankly, the story of the formats has only been one of losing people. And you look at, let's just pretend that every movie that could have been on videotape was. Right, that's not true, but let's just pretend that 100% of movies that were released on commercial tape is some number that we can hold on to. a lot of those old crummy tapes were just from a film print. Like they had real changes in them. They were just run off of a print onto a tape. Those movies couldn't be put onto DVD. Those had, DVDs didn't have real changes on them. They had to come from like the film master. And then Blu-rays have to come like basically from a camera negative in order to be in 2K. And then 4K is even more prohibitive. So like you just have to imagine this like, it's like carbon half-life. Just every new format leaves more things behind. The good news seems to be that a lot of these things that are only available in terrible quality are streamable, often for free, which is fun. But it is a thing that I only know this one book about, but I'm sure more books have been written about like the means of videotape preservation and what it is. I mean, you guys have all these tapes downstairs. Yeah. Someone's doing it.
Well, it's sort of conservation. It's the transfer, I think, is the difficulty. And as a film archive, we try to limit ourselves to film with those as sort of access copies.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, like, as far as I can tell from having sort of helped rebuild the archive of the store I worked in New York, is like you can digitize a tape, but then it just becomes the issue of data storage, which is like no more secure than anything else. Like putting your film prints down there in that 40-degree room, like that's probably fine for 100 or so years. Right. But like if once you digitize all these tapes, you just have like a QuickTime file of a tape. That's not really the same thing as preservation. It's not going to look any better. You could upload it for somebody if they needed to see it, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It just prevents it from getting lost, which is a problem. But it just takes forever because it takes as long as it takes to watch the tape. You can't like do it quickly.
Yeah. And one more question, comment? Yep. Two more. Dealer's choice.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about public library like DVD or video selections, and if you think of that as like separate from the video store, if that ever came up in any of your research for this.
Yeah, tons of thoughts on this because I live in a small town where the only access I have to such things is going to the library, and I've started doing this a lot since I moved, and it's great. And I really recommend it. It's a lot of fun, too. Every library near us is part of the same library system. So you can just like rent things wherever and return them to whichever library you happen to go to. It goes without saying that there's not a single film or TV show that depicts this practice. But I really do like it. It's very interesting. There's an article about it like from a year ago in Filmmaker magazine. So most people here would know that a Blu-ray is a more common format you would think of film consumption. But libraries don't have Blu-rays. They only have DVDs of new movies. Like you walk into a library and they have like challengers on DVD. And I was mentioning this to someone who saw this movie, and he works for Filmmaker magazine, and he's like, oh, we wrote a whole article about that. And essentially it's that libraries, as we can assume, have such limited buying power that they have to assume anyone who could play a Blu-ray could play a DVD. They also assume most of their customers don't care. And they can get 4 DVDs for the price of 1 Blu-ray. And volume is more important to them for their spending power. And this article is very interesting. It is somewhere on filmmakermagazine.com. But going into libraries and picking up DVDs a lot has been really fun for me. Also because there's, as everybody knows, countless movies that are just not streaming or whatever. And one that I'd been I was looking for years in my love of watching political thrillers around July 4th for the late 90s terrorist film Arlington Road. And for 5 years this movie has not been findable. You can't rent it. I'm not saying I need to stream it for free. I'll pay $3.99 for it, but that hasn't been available at all. And then I just found it at the library, and just goes to show you that like a Hollywood film with Jeff Bridges in it that's like made by a studio that still exists you just can't get it for some reason. And it's not like, oh, well, I watched the movie and it's full of Beatles music. It's like, no, I don't know why, but the library had it. Beautiful SD DVD, looked great. Watched it and I returned it.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it tremendously. I mean, it's like a really weird movie to have come out when it did. It's very ahead of its time, and it has like a deeply bleak and depressing ending, which is also cool.
And right around the same time as The Devil's Own with Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
A lot of bombing movies.
Yeah, and Blown Away also.
Oh, yeah, Blown Away.
But yeah, Devil's Own's more of part of like the 90s run of IRA movies. Yeah. But bombs were very popular until people realized how dangerous they were.
Well, last question right here, sir.
So I wanted to start by saying that the library thing, I did that to watch Elephant Man because I know we were on blank check for that.
Oh, cool.
But my question was, I am an indie filmmaker and I know how hard it is to get films out there. And how, with a movie so niche as this, how do you get that out into the world, I guess?
Well, you're looking at it. I'm on the road as much as people want to help support this film. Yeah, I mean, this movie means a lot to me. And like I said, I spent a quarter of my life working on it. And I am more than willing to, it's being distributed by the same nonprofit who made it. And schedule depending, I'm willing to kind of show up anywhere this movie is welcomed because I love talking about it. It opens up, as we're seeing, like half these questions aren't about the movie because I think the movie clearly speaks for itself. There's very little that it's like, so when they show a video store, what do you think? Like, we're talking here about other forms of study connected to the themes of the movie, and I like those conversations. It's so much more interesting than making a scripted film where it's like, what was your inspiration? It's like, you know, we're like, I'm here recommending academic textbooks. That's a good that's a good Q&A in my opinion. But it really is just like, it's a lot of one-off screenings, and knowing that that's fine. Like I've been saying to filmmakers for years, treat film festivals like that's the distribution of your movie because that might be the only time your movie ever plays in this city or that city. And this is a film like, yes, we played for a week and a half in New York, but in most places, I figure one screening of Videoheaven covers everyone in town who wants to see it. And that is our hope. And we're just screening it at a series of art houses, museums, micro cinemas, universities, just kind of for the rest of the year. It won't be on streaming until next year, like next spring or summer. We'll do a 2-tape set, hopefully before it's on streaming. But it is just like, you know, I've made a handful of movies and this is just one of them. But for this one, it's like, if me being there helps 20 more people show up, I'm happy to do it if it works with my schedule because I really want to share this with people and open up conversations not about my movie, but about film spectatorship, which whether you remember video stores or not, if you're even aware of the programming at a theater like this, you care about film spectatorship. Maybe you hate watching movies at home, but you still care about spectatorship in a way that I think this movie hopefully is kind of the definitive word on one form of it. And yeah, I don't know, you just kind of got to do it. Got to get on the train and come to Rochester. And that's how I released the movie. Go to LA next week for the same thing.
Good God. It's a heck of a schedule. Alex, thank you so much for these past 2 days. It's been fantastic. Thank you all for sticking around, and pick up some calendars on your way out. We appreciate it.
Thank you.